I should rightfully be doing this lesson facing the camera, but I cannot, for I am usually crying halfway through. This lesson hurts me. For the first question, how many times must a person forgive her partner for beating her? Never. It must never happen in the first place, and it must never, ever be forgiven. All violence in all relationships must never happen, and it must end now. Using violence, domestic violence, and overt sex to sell what is considered music is part of the reason why guns are used to solve problems today, why women are poorly treated in the ages of 15 to 35, and why physical violence is accepted as a way of life, and domestic battery, starting in the ages of middle school, is considered the norm. When the quote, music you sing along to advocates beating and hitting your romantic partners to, quote, bring them in line, close quote, it decreases your resistance to these acts. The social condemnation of this behavior and the actual behavior increases quickly. When the TV shows and the video games watched show the women bruised and bloodied, acting subservient and timid, the male strutting around and threatening with a fist or a hand upraised, and his friend congratulating him on having such a, quote, well-trained bitch. Is it any surprise that the young mimic these exact words and actions? When TV show after TV show and even animated so-called comedy shows have patterns of language that are both highly abusive and disrespectful of all persons, but especially within the core family, the mother to the children, mother and father to each other, children to each other, and after the first bloody season, the children to their mother. This, then, becomes the language and speech pattern of the country, starting in 1987. From that day forward, no one ever again spoke with respect to a person in authority. That show, the Roseanne Show. In each and every case above, violence, battery, rape, and language and speech patterns that are abusive at their heart and disrespectful as a minimum. Once that genie is released, it can never, ever be put back in its bottle. Once the population has started down the path of deterioration and degradation, it can't just stop and turn back to being respectful, non-violent, non-sexual, and treating women as equals. Because the male beast and the developing brain, once their wee little brains are exposed to any slightly higher amount of testosterone, it wants more. And the spigot, once opened, continues to open further. Violence, once started, continues to increase. And if they are fed on a constant diet of images of sexual and domestic violence, their brain won't know how to respond but with the given stimuli response. There are no competing images, no competing values of a loving family living together with a dad figure coming home and honouring a mom figure every day. of the kids showing honor and respect to their parents and to each other. And nowhere in certain communities is there any imagery showing valuation and strength from education. Yet the dropout rate and any low achievement scores are blamed on everyone but the family. The community has no support and they lack the value in education, and yet they blame the mainstream for the lack of competing education value. Before you say, it doesn't matter, look around you! Look around you! Joking, singing, if you call it that, rapping and filming about domestic violence. And then you say, it was just a goof. Beyoncé says in the press release when asked about the rumor of domestic assault with the creation of Lemonade. You don't joke or goof about domestic violence and rape. That this person did, and no one said a word, shows how far this society has slipped down the ramp, how accepting of these images and behavior society has become. Some of you must have some values somewhere. I am not some American prude about sex. I am quite liberal compared to Americans about visual sexual imagery from living abroad. But it is the violence against women in the words and in the images that must end. Sex has its place in a loving relationship, but the instant a hand is raised, there is no longer love, but only control. There is no love when one is trying to control or dictate any part of another person's life or part of a relationship. It is time to care again how things look, how things seem, and to always call, always, every time call when you hear or suspect violence. Not acting is a sinful act of omission, and it is a sin against God Himself. In 1992 and 93, I started working in 9 school districts, teaching how domestic violence permeated over 60% of then most popular TV programs and 90% of rock, hip-hop, rap music. I had videos of examples. It expanded nationally and later was converted to business use. This was instigated when I learned that 8 juniors I was mentoring were all being abused by their boyfriends or had been by past boyfriends, and 2 showed up in a meeting with black eyes from a party the night before. I learned that a boy, 17 years old, 6'6", 250 pounds, had picked up Susan by her throat and held her above his head, drunk off his ass, accusing her of telling his girlfriend to leave him at the party for again getting drunk off his ass. He then threw her into the wall. This after beating on the girlfriend, Marion. They both told their parents they'd bumped their heads. The parents, a bunch of fools. But in conversation, I learned this was so common an occurrence that they thought nothing of it. That's just Nate, they said. I immediately went to the school's principal and full counselling staff. The fools, they were aware of it, but had done nothing. I forced them to call the school liaison officer and filed charges as the responsible adult for assault against Nate for the minors Susan and Marion. Both came from class and were rageful at me. The officer, at my demand, took them to the morgue to view bodies of 17-year-old girls who had been beaten to death by their boyfriend just over that past weekend. one with a broken neck from being picked up by the neck as Sue had been, the other unrecognizable from the beating as Marion would have been. Their class was the first I spoke to, at the school from which I'd graduated from just a decade earlier. From this month of sessions, we learned over 80% of the relationships in the high schools and middle schools had physical incidents of domestic violence. 11 and 12-year-old children abusing their girlfriends exactly as they'd seen Dad do to Mum, or Big Brother to get his girlfriend to do him, or in the video, or on TV. I then started a series of interpersonal violence reduction education classes in the schools and for business. Everyone learned the appropriate communications within a relationship. Role-playing reinforced, and then the stilted conversations they learned to listen. First sessions started with a brief introduction, and then they watched a clip of videos. The clips were 47 minutes of clips from shows from Roseanne, The Simpsons, physical violence in the guise of action on multiple Fox and cable shows, rap music videos, cheering on rape and encouraging murder, mainstream hip-hop with humans forever reduced to titles and no longer a human being but baby mama, etc. Gradually, the laughter died out in the room and was silent when the presentation ended with the video of The Thunder Rolls by Garth Brooks. If you're unfamiliar, Google it and watch it. I finished with, "You just witnessed the most intense 47 minutes of violence, disrespectful behavior one human can inflict upon another, especially as in every of the relationships demonstrated the people speaking, swearing at, disrespecting, insulting, hitting, beating, shooting, and raping the other they say they love, that they are harming." Imagine, this is how they express love. How do they express rape? How they express hate? You all mimic this behavior in many ways. This stops today, now. No more will any of you be spit upon, sworn at, told you are ugly, fat, or stupid, told you should not be alive, or anything similar. No more will you be hit, kicked, or hurt. No more will you be harmed in any way by any person from this school, or at home, or at work, on the street. No more will you be forced to have sex. There was crying throughout the darkened room. There was a dedicated phone line set up with a team of special police officers, different from each school, so that it could be tracked. And they would respond to any person at that school. All they had to do is say code safety zone, and the squad would be with them within 3 minutes. If they needed medical help, all they had to do was say medical. No lights and sirens unless you want them to light it up. Then come quiet in case you are slipping away from your abuser. All who have hurt you will be arrested, and it will happen no more to you. Each of you listening, go now. Observe your behavior and change it now, so that each time you feel a button pushed, you respond respectfully and with the love you have for that person. If you feel that you will be violent, today, now, upon hearing this, contact the Domestic Abuse Center in your nearest city, if you're not in a large city, and tell them, "I am a domestic abuser and I want to stop. Help me." And they will help you stop. Don't wait another second. Contact them now, please.